Hi, my name is Jojo and I'm a member of the RCP steering group. Today you will see 3 young people's journeys into homelessness.
My name is Saoirse. I grew up in Poglas and I had a very hard time growing up. There wasn't a lot to do around this area, so we went from street corner to street corner. I ended up getting into my first serious relationship with a boy from the same crowd. My mum and dad really weren't fond of this fella whatsoever. Over the next few months, my parents and me were fighting constantly over this. So about 4 months later, my boyfriend and his friend pulled up outside my house in a car, so I went out to talk to them. My parents thought that they could make all my decisions for me and I'd simply had enough. The car I was in drove off with me in it. My dad chased after us and caught up with us eventually. There was a commotion and my dad tried to get me to come home. I stayed between my boyfriend's and my friend's house in the following weeks of the commotion with my dad. I had no belongings as I hadn't went home, so I was feeling completely lost. I worried about my future for the first time in my life and had no clue about where to go for help. So I went to the police to see if they could help me get my belongings from the home. After I had failed to get my stuff back, the police escorted me to the housing executive and told me that I had to declare myself homeless, so I did. They assigned me points, but told me they had nowhere suitable for me to go as I was only 17. Having nowhere suitable to go, I had to sofa surf again. Me and my boyfriend had broken up at this stage, so my options were limited. Meanwhile, my judo coach, Rebecca, had been checking in on me and eventually offered me to stay with her. By this stage, Rebecca was the only one who tried to help me and understood my situation. Without her, I don't know where I would be. I stayed with Rebecca for 7 months and things actually started to feel normal again. I felt like there was a weight lifted off my shoulders. But as time went on, it was becoming unsuitable for me to stay at Rebecca's as she's a foster mum and has other kids living at her house. Eventually, after continuously phoning the housing executive, they put me in Farset International Hotel for 3 days until a room was available in Flax Foyer. I think with a little more support, I could have gotten into independent living a lot sooner. Being only 17 at the time, social services had contacted me a couple of times, but they didn't have the right information on me, so they couldn't give me the support that I needed. I think someone from social services should have sat me down and asked me actually what was going on. So on the morning of my 18th birthday, I received a phone call from social services to tell me that they could no longer support me, which I thought was ridiculous, as they hadn't supported me at all anyway. To be honest, I am an optimistic person, so I wasn't letting any of this get me down. I went along to the RCP recruitment sessions and have been a member of the group ever since.
I grew up in Longlands with my mummy, my daddy and my 2 brothers and my 2 sisters. At this time I was about 16 years old. I was a kid, loved football, went to Hightown, and as far as I was concerned, I was just a normal kid. Around this time, my mum and dad had split up. I was sneaking out of the house and trying to find any party that I could, and all my friends were older than me and had introduced me to coke. I think looking back, my mum and dad breaking up had a big effect on me. Obviously this was all having an effect on my mum. I was told to leave the house and that she couldn't stick it anymore. So I went to live with my nanny, but I was still using drugs and still partying. It got to a point where I was stealing money to pay for my lifestyle and I was having suicidal thoughts because of the guilt. It was getting too much. I felt that I was hurting people around me that I loved the most. I ended up in Holywell Hospital. They told me because I was still under the influence that I wouldn't be admitted until I was sober and sent me home. My ma took upon herself to lock me in a room in my nanny's until I had sobered up, and then we went back to the hospital 3 days later where we were offered leaflets and some advice, including a phone number for Lifeline. After 2 weeks I left the hospital. Once I left her I went back to live at my nanny's, but that was too much pressure on her and I had to go live with my friends. I felt all the doors were starting to close on me. The hospital had only dealt with my physical condition, but I was still lost and sofa surfing at my friends and basically back with the same crowd. The drugs and the drink still continued. The housing executive put me into the Ormo Centre. I was openly being offered heroin in the group kitchen. It was mad. My key worker in the Ormo Centre had told me it was time to move on after 3 weeks and had arranged to pass me on to another hostel, which was the Salmon community in Clivenville. I immediately felt a little better because there was less people and I felt that I had my own space again. However, 4 days later, the cops were kicking in my flat door that I shared with another fella because he was accused of dealing. That day I visited the local soup kitchen in St Patrick's, as I had done for the last 4 weeks, and met Paul McCusker, who was a local SLP counsellor. He offered me help and support and put a referral into Flex for you. That day I got the interview and moved in the day after.
At the age of 14, I was living at home in Armagh with my mummy and my 2 little sisters. My mummy and daddy were separated. I went to St Catherine's College. I didn't really do anything in my spare time because my sisters were too young to be left with my mum, as she had a bad drug misuse problem. Things at home started to get really bad, so I stopped going to school to stay home to look after my wee sister. At the time, my mummy couldn't even string a sentence together, never mind look after her, so I had to do everything for my wee sister. At this time, I was just so worried. Because I hadn't been going to school, they kept sending court letters out till my mum. My mum wasn't replying, so the teacher called till my mum's house and my mum was out cold as she was taking drugs and she couldn't wake up. The teacher phoned social services and they came out with the police at 1 AM in the morning. I'll never forget this. It was awful. They told me that they were taking me. I was kicking and screaming. I didn't want to leave my sister, but the police held me down and handcuffed me. They had to take me to the Armagh police station, then they had to take me to the Newry police station, and then they finally dropped me off till Kilkeel, till a foster home at 3 in the morning. I had 54 different foster placements from November to June. I was moved at least a couple of times a week, from Dungannon to Portrush to Coleraine to Newry, all in 1 week. At that time, I just felt like nobody wanted me and I couldn't settle. Whenever you tell people you're in foster care, they automatically assume that you're the bad person. It was Christmas Eve and I went to live with yet another foster care again, called Maria. It was meant to be short term, but Maria says it was ridiculous that I kept getting moved about. In fairness, Maria had 6 other foster kids to look after, but I stayed here for 3 years. I wanted to be with my own family, so I started running away and messing about. But in fairness, Maria never gave up on me. On my 18th birthday, social services says that I couldn't live with Maria anymore. I was raging, I was mad, and I started eventually taking drugs. This got so out of control, I ended up overdosing and spent a week in intensive care. This was definitely my wake-up call. Social services found me a place in a hostel in Armagh a week later, but it wasn't the right place for me. It was full of adults and I just felt really scared. I only lasted a week. I went to the housing executive in Armagh with all of my stuff in 3 black bags. They told me that there was nowhere local and they sent me in a taxi to Belfast. The Northern Ireland Housing Executive in Belfast was shut. It was my first time being in Belfast. Didn't know where I was going, only knew that it was a place called Centenary House. So picture me walking about with my black bags, asking people where Centenary House was at 10 o'clock at night. I finally arrived at Centenary House, but there was no crash beds left. I felt like a mug, have came the whole way till a different town with nowhere to go. I finally run into a girl I knew and she says that there was a place called the Ormo Centre and it had crash beds. So she took me there and it was a fair jaunt away. They let us sleep on their sofa for the night. The next day I went to the Northern Ireland Housing Executive in Belfast. They got me a place in Malone Foyer. I stayed here from January until June.